All right, sorry if I'm a little bit late. I was doing a short write-up of this chapter, um, and I find it interesting because I've been kind of going into these so-called journalists who I believe are actually activists, and that write with a slant and don't actually just report the facts, but want to show through their so-called journalism slant of some kind. Um, so I'll just read the little blurb that I just wrote, and then we'll read uh, the book. So here we go. This chapter explores the evolution of the Tool Society, how it grew, and eventually was absorbed into the NSDAP. 1919 parallels today with warring factions of communists, anarchists, and fascists, as well as all the kooky New Age beliefs that were a part of its zeitgeist. Today, these groups coalesce in online spaces like Twitter, Discord, and Reddit. Today's so-called journalists are just activists posing as such, much like the journalists that Sabatendorf employed at his newspaper. And that should be one sentence. But anyway, I just wrote this. There's always a political flavor, and discernment is key. Is the writer calling for America is the writer calling America the most evil imperialist nation and trying to sugarcoat the terror of Hamas? Then they are likely communists of some kind. Does the writer mourn for a golden age, seem obsessed with IQ, blood, and soil? Well, then they're likely a fascist of some kind. So, without further ado, here we go with chapter 5, Riffraff into Supermen. There's some numerology also that I'll point out as I'm reading. But here's a quote at the beginning of this chapter called Riffraff into Supermen, and the quote is by Theodore Fritsch here. As soon as the bonds of civic order lie shattered on the ground, and law is trodden underfoot, the sacred Veem enters on its rights. It must not fear to smite the mass criminals with their own weapons. After the war, the democratic regime symbolized to the Volkish mind Jewish control. The protest against economic, political, and social difficulties became an anti-Jewish revolution. Shell-shocked Germans came home after the ordeal of the fighting and the defeat to find chaos and hunger in the streets. They remembered the anti-Semitic propaganda they had heard and read about before the war. It was reinforced by new propaganda. The Jew was the anarchist, the communist, the one who caused the defeat and would bring down the world. In such an atmosphere of terror, the Tool Society prospered. It was clear to Sabatendorf that the small room on the Zweigstrasse where the group had been meeting would no longer serve if it was to expand. Now meetings were held every Saturday, the day of Saturn, in the elegant Munich hotel Ver Jahrzeiten. So here's a picture of the hotel, which just means it's the Four Seasons, okay? Whose proprietor was a member of Tool. Sabatendorf rented the rooms of a naval officers' club and adorned them with the society's arms, a curved swastika pointing right, plus the sword and the wreath. The rooms could accommodate 300 people. And that's their arms there. Here, said Sabatendorf, objectives could be attained. The consecration of the new meeting place was attended by the chairman and committee of the Germanen Ordens Berlin chapter. They officially made Sabatendorf representative of theirs and a master, and accepted the name Tool as a cover for the Orden. A week later, when 30 people were consecrated to the first grade, it was decided that every third Saturday of the month was to be dedicated as a consecration lodge, and on all other Saturdays, talks were to be held. So notice the number 3, and they're going to mention the Trinity that they worshipped here. Number 3 is a sacred number to in a lot of different belief systems. It forms a triangle. It's the mother, the father, and the child. In Catholicism, right, you have the Holy Trinity. So the number 3, I think, is very significant here. The group was kept busy with meetings, initiations, and excursions at least once a week, as well as talks on such subjects as divining rods, mysticism, and bardic ritual. Every member wore a bronze pin, which was designed as a shield upon which were 2 spears crossing a swastika. And so I believe that's what this is talking about. Sabbatendorf bought the newspaper Der Münchener Beobachter because he felt that proselytizing against the enemy could not be done as effectively through the spoken word as through the press. And there's an image. It was a sports newspaper. And though it was a sports newspaper, Sabbatendorf was attracted to it for several reasons. The readership was young. It was impossible to start a newspaper because of the paper shortage and because the government did not allow new papers to appear. And most important, quote, the Jew had no interest in sports if it did not have any monetary advantage, so the Jew would not buy and read the paper. Therefore, a sports paper could make propaganda without being detected. My note, and this is sort of just a tangent, but this idea where you have to get them young. I mean, I think revolution, the people that you see on these college campuses, right? This is for the young. It's for the mind that has not fully developed yet, who has not encountered all of life yet. And I truly believe revolution and these kinds of political movements is for the young, because eventually you live life, unless you live a very sheltered life, and that then you're just part of the activist class. But you live life, you see lots of different things, and you might change your mind and become more moderate over time. That's just my thought there. And you have to get them young because they're impressionable at that age. That's why the trans cult goes after children. So anyway, Sabbatendorf was wrong, of course, but showed no awareness of this, as he went on blithely contradicting himself. How right these calculations were is shown by the Jewish ire against the editor. They called the paper itself unimportant. The paper had been established in 1887. The former publisher, now deceased, had been a client of the attorney Gabatz, the Tool member, and Sabbatendorf bought the publishing rights from his widow for 5,000 marks. The paper had no subscribers and was distributed on the street. Sabbatendorf himself was the editor. The first edition was 5,000 copies. What's interesting, I don't know if you guys remember Vice magazine, like before it was, like a video outlet, but those were free. And I find that kind of an interesting parallel because Vice was also started by like Gavin McInnes, who is pretty famous neo-Nazi. Early issues were given over to exhortation to keep your blood pure and to propaganda about the Jew as a parasitic capitalist and participant in the black market. According to Sabbatendorf, this was something Munich never heard of. In addition to the big questions, we did not forget the details. We were very critical about everything. By November 1st, 1918, the Tool organization had 1,500 members in all Bavaria, 250 of them in Munich. The paid membership journeyed to Berlin to be indoctrinated into further propaganda. The meeting was on Saturday, November 9th, so we have the 11-9 numerology here. I think that number is very important to occultists. So the meeting was on Saturday, November 9th, 1918, and it was a crucial one. The war was ending, the monarchy collapsing. The Jew, Kurt Eisner, had taken control of the Bavarian government 2 days earlier. And so here's an image of him. A series of revolts had just broken out, which promised chaos for the whole country. Munich, in fact, was engulfed in revolution. The old order had proven itself bankrupt, not only in Germany and Austria, but in Russia. The Bolshevism, which had triumphed there, was the big bugbear feared by the middle and upper classes in Germany and Austria. And I think rightly so. I think this was like it's kind of a difficult time to imagine, but you have all of these different kinds of people who have these different political belief systems, and they're all fighting with each other. And it's because of the poverty and the, unstable situation that Germany was in at the time. It was all of Europe, I believe, was in a sort of identity crisis after World War One. And I think they were right to fear the Bolsheviks because, I mean, that's another book I could read to you about. I have a book about them, about the famine that was caused by it. Um, anyway, so I think they were rightly afraid of this. Um, the toppled empire in Germany created a vacuum in which revolutionaries of the right and left fought for domination. Conspirators were everywhere. German radicals looked to Russia for guidance and financial support. Munich was one of the key cities for revolutionary activity, and the little anti-Semitic lodges now consolidated into something like a mass movement. As the November 9th At the November 9th meeting, Sabotendorf told the members, quote, "Yesterday we lived through the whole breakdown of what was good and holy to us. Instead of our blood-related Kaiser, there now reigns Judah. We have to fight the Jew. He who cannot follow me, despite his oath of loyalty to me, he should get out. I won't be angry about it. He who wants to stay with me, he should know that there is no going back, but only forward. He who wants to stay should remember his oath even until his death. I myself assure you and swear to you by the holy sign. Listen to the victorious Son. I also will be loyal to you. Trust in me as you have trusted in me before." He then lapsed into mythological metaphysics, reminding them that their god was Walvader or Wotan, right? So here's what he's talking about. The self-born power and spirit, whose rune was the Arun, Aryan, fire, sun, eagle, sunwheel, swastika, and whose trinity was Wotan, Willie, and we. Lest the members find this a bit obscure, he admonished, never would we allow a low-class brain, or never, let me start that again. Lest the members find this a bit obscure, he admonished, never would a low-class brain comprehend the unity of a trinity. Willie, like we, the polarization of Walvator, and Wodan, the godly, immanent law. The Trinity originated, he said, from the first creation. It then created the world and the first human pair. Wodan created the self or spirit of the life power. Willie gave thought and the will, and we the feeling and emotions. What did this odd mixture of ancient Eastern philosophy and Norse mythology have to do with the revolution raging outside the Veer Jahrzeiten, or the hotel they were at? It provided a rationale for the dangerous mission the members were being called on to accomplish. Quote, "My friends, as of today, the red eagle is our symbol. It should point to the fact that we may have to go through death to live." And that's how you can spot nihilism. It's always a death cult. It's having absolutely no regard for life and the miracle of life. He continues, "The Jews know very well that they have to fear the R, as it even says in the Holy Scriptures, 5th book of Moses 28:49, and the Lord will awaken unto you a people from far away, from the end of the earth, which flies like an eagle, as people whose language you do not understand." With this pep talk, Sabotendorf cursed any member who procrastinated or compromised, who did not join in the 8 o'clock consecration of the following day, the birthday of Luther and Schiller. The master adjourned the meeting with a schmaltzy poem by Philip Stoff. No one, of course, dared to miss the meeting on November 10th. No one except Sabotendorf himself, who was laid low with a fever. Wow, it's almost like God cursed him. The armistice became official the next day, and the Tool Society quietly prepared for counter-revolution. Its members could not accept the surrender of the German army nor the proclamations of the Republican government. Conditions after the war were intolerable. Food was almost impossible to get, and jobs even scarcer. It was not uncommon to see wounded war veterans begging in the streets. With production crippled and inflation rampant, the country became a vast starvation camp. In 5 years' time, from 1918 to 1923, the mark had sunk to one-fifth its value, which reduced the middle class to poverty. In the harsh winter, people searched everywhere for coal and kindling. See, and that's why I don't want a revolution. I don't want any kind of, I don't want poverty. I don't want us to have to look for potable water. And that's why all these revolutionaries make me so upset, because it's like, would you even be able to survive during such a time period? Probably not. What's up, Terry? How's it going? Looks like it's just you and me right now. Um, they don't want a revolution. They don't really want one. They just want to talk. I think if these things were to come to pass, they would be very, very difficult for most people to endure. I think it's a fantasy. Um, in the harsh winter, people searched everywhere for coal and kindling. One observer remarked, if a store offered dog biscuits, a long line formed outside to procure them. People ate whatever they could find. Horse meat became a delicacy, potato a luxury. But for the Tool Society, there was a surprising upswing. Because of governmental suspicion about the possible conspiratorial nature of the organizations, many buns were thrown out of their meeting rooms. Landlords wanted no trouble. The innocent appearing Tool was left alone, and with its runic obsessions was able to play host to these other boons, who shared a similar ideology. Sabotendorf observed, quote, that was good, since for the first time single groups could be in proximity to each other, because it happened very often that two or three took place at one time. In the Tool Society, everything went like a pigeon coup. Here was the National Liberal Party under Hans Dahn. Here also was the All Germans under editor Julius Lehmann. I think I have a picture of him. Oh wait, I guess I didn't do that guy. The German School Bund under Rometer, and the Writing Fellows, the Hammer Bund. In short, there was not a society in Munich that somehow represented any nationalistic aim which could not be tented in the Tool Society, right? So they became the big tent. All these groups were made up, for the most part, of men who had fought in the war and returned to their country, stunned to find that the pre-war world had blasted away. In these secret meetings, what they fantasized was a world better able to fulfill their longings. It was to Toul that the civil engineer Gottfried Feder first came, and so that's who that is. And when I found this picture, I was like, I guess that mustache was like super in vogue at the time. Like, what's the deal with this mustache? Yeah, revolutionaries are dumb. They're probably incredibly naive. I think it's for young people. It's for young people whose frontal lobes have not fully formed. That's what I think. Terry says England was like that after World War One too. Yeah, it was bad for everybody, and so it's interesting how German and the Germany or the Germany how Germany reacted to it. I find kind of fascinating, and I see parallels of this happening today in the United States, of these different kinds of so-called like revolutionary radical groups coalescing. There are lots of different ones. Um, and we are in a recession, and but it's a different story, because I really honestly do believe that Marxism infiltrated the university system. The people who were responsible for the violent revolutionary actions of the 1970s, Bill Ayers, for example, became Obama's mentor. So we have a long standing kind of slippery slope of rot that we're now, I think we're coming to some kind of pinnacle. We're at some kind of precipice. And I just see a lot of parallels here. Where was I? So it was to Toul that civil engineer Gottfried Feder first came. He was well known in Munich for an eccentric proposal for ridding the country of all its troubles. As a crankish amateur economist, he babbled about the machinations of Jewish high finance, which undercut German production. His slogan became "Break the shackles of finance capital," and the way to do it was by abolishing interest slavery. He urged Toul to try to win over the workers who were being wooed by the left and the communists. Anton de Monlang, that's this guy down here, whose hobby was genealogy, worked on ancestral research. Walter Nahaus, that's this guy, was a sculptor and in charge of Nordic culture. The editor, Julius Lehmann, I don't think do I have a picture of him? Here's Julius Lehmann, argued for a coup d'etat and brought weapons to store in Toul rooms. One night at dinner, Sabotendorf was seized with a premonition that the premises was going to be searched. He ran quickly and hid the arms. No sooner had he done this than an investigator came. In conjunction with plotting the counter-revolution, Toul was busy fighting other occult groups like Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy. Here's Rudolf Steiner. Steiner had been head of Madame Blavatsky's German branch of the Theosophical Society and had broken with it over a dispute and started his own group. I believe that was in the Hollywood book we read, and their dispute was he didn't agree with the the holy person, this young Indian man that she had found. I could be mistaken about that. I'd have to research it. I think I knew that at some point, but my brain is a little foggy. Steiner observed Sabotendorf wanted to become finance minister and propagate his system of Trinity, which presumably was different from Toul's. Through his system, he sought to reform communism. So that was Steiner's project, rather than to destroy it. The influence of this degenerate man, this swindler and liar, all of these are quotes attributed to Sabotendorf, was all-encompassing. He had many disciples in Munich, but was set back, said Sabotendorf, quote, due to the fact that there were so many suicides and sexually abused women among them. And so that's interesting. I'd have to look into it. Steiner is kind of a fascinating figure in this whole tapestry. So I wonder, if like any guru, many of them seem to abuse their followers in some way. Let us continue. So among them, before the war, he had worked with a clairvoyant, Lisbeth Seidler, in Berlin. The pair had connections with General Helmuth von Moltke, and they were the ones who stopped the new recruits from going into the Marne battle when they were needed. That's how the battle was lost, says Sabotendorf, who did not miss an opportunity to attack them in his newspaper. The tool itself was not without its influence. Countess Hyla von Westarp, she's here, was the society's attractive young secretary, another aristocratic member. And so this is interesting to me because I talk about what I call the activist class all the time. And the activist class is a class of people that has the time, money, and resources to devote to activism. So they're usually from wealthy people. They hold luxury beliefs. For example, today they might say something like abolish the police or abolish prisons because they don't actually have to live with the rest of us. So the activist class is even present in 1919 Germany. So this was their secretary. Another aristocratic member was Prince Gustav von Turn und Taxis, a name prominent throughout Europe. Here's that guy. Robert Payne comments in The Life and Death of Adolf Hitler that Sabotendorf had ingratiated himself into Munich society. Large sums of money were at his disposal, and many of the most influential people in Munich were his disciples. This powerful occult circle included adepts, judges, lawyers, professors, leading industrialists, surgeons, scientists, and even former members of the royal entourage of the Wittelsbach kings. The Bavarian Minister of Justice Franz Gertner, the police president of Munich, Ernest Poner, and the assistant police chief, William Frick, were active. It was not surprising then that the Tool's hidden activities were held responsible for much of the cold-blooded terrorism in that turbulent time. In the beginning of December, Tool members planned to capture Kurt Eisner, right? And so that was the president at the time, the Jewish minister president of Bavaria, who had led the revolt against the monarchy on November 7th. To Toolists, Eisner, an ethereal-looking intellectual, champion of the League of Nations, and conciliator of the communists, represented everything odious. And I don't blame them, I don't. I think communism is fairly odious. What's going on, Pinocchio's helicopter? Hey, guys. I hope your day is going well. I shall continue here. So, like, for me, it's kind of a difficult sort of quagmire. Like, who would I want to win, right? I certainly wouldn't want the Bolsheviks or the communists to win, but I also wouldn't want the Nazis to win either. So it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like a really interesting question. And of course, I didn't, live through that time period. So nice. I'm glad. I'm glad everything is well. All right. Eisner's 100-day reign was tinged with bohemianism. Symphony concerts preceded political speeches. Poetry was recited from a roving truck which toured the streets as if someone observed a picnic and not a revolution were going on. In executive sessions, Eisner expounded on the inner nature of politics, which he thought was as much of an art as painting pictures or composing string quartets. Shortly after Eisner's assassination on February 21st, police came to investigate Tool and search for anti-Semitic flyers. Sabotendorf threatened that if his members were not granted immunity from arrest, they would take a Jew, drag him through the streets, and say he stole a consecrated wafer. Then you will have a program on your hands, and that will take you out of office at the same time. When the police assured him he was crazy, he answered, "Perhaps, but my craziness has a mouth." He meant presumably that he was a man of influence, one who could not be silenced, which must have been the case, since no one from Toul was arrested. The main thrust of Toul was to consolidate the anti-Semitic organizations into militant action. Toward this end, the NSDAP, Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, was established on January 18th, 1919. So here's their badge. And it was established in the rooms of the hotel And Karl Harrer, a sports writer for the newspaper, was made its first chairman. A small proportion of Tool members were also members of the early NSDAP. Um, that's the writer that was just mentioned. He has Sampaku eyes. He's really creepy looking. What's going on? I got right. Like it's such a fascinating period to explore because I feel like there are a lot of parallels. And what do you choose? Do you choose the scary occult fascists or the godless communists or the anarchists? Like who is the best, to rule? Um, where does the normal man have to go but within? You're lurking. No worries. Just chill out, relax. Maybe get something cool to drink and read about Nazis with me or listen to me read about them. Um, all right, let's see. So, Karl Harrer apparently still hankered after the original secret discussion meetings where one could cultivate feelings of exclusiveness. And that's always something that you have to understand about secret societies and their draw. It's the allure of exclusiveness and secrecy, right? Like you're in a secret club and you have knowledge that other people don't. His days as a chairman were numbered, and so were Tool's as an officially recognized society. The last consecration took place on March 21st, so you have 321. 21 also is an important number because it adds up to 3. On March 21st, 1919, the government now insisted that groups had to be incorporated and the only leaders they would recognize had to be elected. One had to abandon the Führer principle, so Bottendorf wistfully noted. Tool members did continue to meet informally. After the Eisner assassination, the new minister-president of Bavaria fled northward to the city of Bamberg with his cabinet to avoid an imminent takeover by the communists. He issued a proclamation that the regime of the Bavarian Free State has not resigned. It has transferred its seat from Munich. The regime is and will remain the single possessor of power in Bavaria. The Tool Society helped to set up a military group of anti-communists, infiltrated communist organizations, and was in touch with the legal Bavarian government in Bamberg. On April 13th, Tool members participated in a debacle known as the Palm Sunday Putsch, which was intended to restore the Bamberg government to power in Munich and prevent communist takeover. The leader of the putsch, Alfred von Sifritz, described a comic scene after the current head of Tool, Friedrich Knopf, had presented him with the gallant offer of 600 men. When the actual event took place, only 10 or 12. Like, can you imagine? They're gearing up for this revolutionary action, and only 10 people show up. Only 10 or 12 Tool men came, one of them a captain in gala uniform, patent leather riding boots, riding whip, and a monocle. um, the putsch was to have driven out the communists, and it had the opposite effect. It opened the way for a true dictatorship of the proletariat. Virtual anarchy reigned in Munich. The communists seized control on April 14th and began taking hostages in reprisal for the murder of other communists. 12 days later, they invaded the Tool rooms, arresting Countess von Westarp, Prince von Thurn and Taxis, a sculptor, a painter, a baron, a railroad official, and an industrial artist. Sabotendorf laid on Knopf the charge of failing to hide the membership lists, and they were executed. So this is, and they were executed shortly afterwards. Sabotendorf himself had journeyed to Bamberg in the hope of enlisting the help of the Free Corps, a paramilitary band of volunteers under the leadership of former army officers, supported by rich industrialists. pledged to defend the Bamberg government in exile. Together with rightist politicians and army officers, the Free Corps was getting ready to overthrow the communists. Counter-revolutionaries in Munich helped by smuggling men, arms, and money to the Free Corps. The men in the Free Corps, unfit for civilian life, had a personal stake in the fight. For them, the war had never ended. They were still intoxicated with it. Some had come straight out of school into the trenches, where they had learned how to be hard and how to make sacrifices. And in the margin here, some years ago, I wrote Spies and Criminals and the Occult. Post-war Germany was despicable to these men, and they were with the toolists in wanting to restore the past, which I put quotation marks around. Again, one of the telltale signs of, I believe, fascism is this romanticization of the past, a golden age, right? They were joined by students who felt superfluous in a society that was falling apart. They had nothing better to do than to kill and plunder. 4 days after seizing the 7 Tool members, the communist leader in Munich, Rudolf Egelhofer, ordered them shot. And I think that's this guy right here. He claimed that they were counter-revolutionaries and, after all, accountable to civil law. Tool members had, in fact, been smuggling men and information out of the city. They had become especially gifted at forging documents, assembling caches of weapons, and recruiting men for the Free Corps, whose volunteers were laying plans to defeat the left. While 20,000 Free Corps men marched on the city, the hostages were taken to Luitpold High School, which the communists were using as a barracks as well as a jail. They were lined up against the courtyard wall and executed. After the hostage murders, the communists posted a notice that a band of criminals of the so-called upper classes, right? So this is interesting when you break it down, right? Because a lot of the Tool Society members were indeed aristocrats. That is something that the Bolsheviks and the communists, they wanted to rid society of. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to note. So a band of criminals of the so-called upper classes had been captured, arch reactionaries who forged official documents to get confiscated goods and agents for the counter-revolution. The executions caused an unprecedented wave of outrage among the citizenry. The anti-Semitic groups lost no opportunity to make effective propaganda, spreading rumors of fearful atrocities. The civil strife, which had begun right after the war, came to a horrifying climax over these murders. 3 Jews in the communist government, Eugene Levine Nissen, Tobias Axelrod, and Max Levine, were alleged responsible for the deaths as an act of vengeance against their anti-Semitic enemies, a charge which was never proved, right? Because it was this guy. The Free Corps, inflamed by the hostage murders, stormed through Munich, setting fire to a beer hall and fighting with the mortars and hand grenades. See, and I don't want this kind of thing to happen in the United States. I'm really, really against any kind of revolution. I choose the Jewish overlords. Oh man, these nerds trying to last Airbender Munich. What do you mean by that? I've never seen that movie. Should I watch it later? What do you think? Do you recommend? I'll check back in a second. So they were marching through the streets singing swastika on helmet, colors black, white, and red. And so I think, with my color symbolism that I've come up with, I think black represents the void or nothingness, white represents purity, and red is obviously blood or sacrifice. And it's interesting to me that both the communists and the Nazis choose the same colors, because really they're two sides of the same coin, aren't they? I believe Hannah Arendt pointed that out. Soon they would call themselves stormtroopers. During the Civil War which followed, the communists were defeated and the racist nationalists received a great boost. It was in every way a rehearsal and a preparation for the brutalities to come later. Yeah, that's my last image for this. As to the Tool Society, it seems to have come to an end, along with the 7 hostages. Also, 7 is an important number, I think, as well. 3, 7. Anyway, 2 days after their internment, there was a memorial service at the Tool Rooms. The pulpit was draped with the captured communist flag, but instead of the hammer and sickle, there was a swastika. The murder of the members had opened new possibilities. Sabotendorf disappeared from Munich. He eventually returned to Istanbul and then made his way to Mexico. Like, what a coward. He's hiding out. He reappeared in Munich in 1933, hoping to revive Tool, but by that time, the NSDAP he had helped to launch was doing very well without him. Some of the other Tool members were now in a position to implement what they had learned at those meetings on Saturdays and the Vier Jahrhunderten Hotel, the Four Seasons. Eventually, the NSDAP assumed the power to come near to destroying Europe. That power, René Alou observed, derived from one source, quote, a fanatical auto-hypnosis, which convinced disciples, succumbing to the totalitarian discipline in the promise of reaching a transcendent reality, that they were the new men that the age was waiting for, that they were endowed with a secret energy which would enable them to take over Germany and the world. And they were properly prepared. If they were properly prepared, mysteries would be revealed to them which would give them satanic powers. Incredible as it may seem, the members and guests of the Tool Society thought of themselves as potential masters of the earth, protected against all dangers. I mean, that's obviously not true. They discarded the teachings of Christ to take on the dark occult, which, even though I believe can be very powerful, it does seem to have quite a terrible effect on its practitioners. Just look at Aleister Crowley. Some of them became key figures in the Nazi Party. Max Amann, business manager of the party's newspaper and publishing house, Dietrich Eckart, who introduced Hitler to Munich society, Hans Frank, Governor General of Poland. I'm just going to scroll up to this because that's what we're talking about here. Anton Drexler, first chairman of the German Workers' Party, Gottfried Feder, economic advisor, Karl Herrer, first chairman of the NSDAP, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's secretary and first adjutant, Adolf Hitler, Dr. Heinz Kurz, SS leader, Frederick Krohn, dentist who designed the Nazi swastika insignia. That's weird that it was a dentist. That really creeps me out. Ernest Röhm, leader of stormtroopers, Alfred Rosenberg, commissioner for Eastern Affairs, Julius Streicher, who was the party district leader of Franconia. The philosophy behind this cult, never mentioned at the Nuremberg trials, sheds new light on the atrocities which were about to come, on the tacit sanction of them by the German people and the Messiah who led them. And that is the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6 is called The Savage Messiah, which I believe, will discuss Hitler. Let me see what you guys are up to in the chat. I do thank all of you for coming. Person, turquoise wizard wand. What Well, I don't know. What is The Last Airbender even about? I'm going to type it in. I've never seen it. The Last Airbender. Oh, Avatar, right? Okay. What is it? I'm like, I guess I'm like not that kind of nerd. I'm like a different kind of nerd. Um, it's an animated series, or in the, I guess, became a movie. Oh, they can telekinetically manipulate. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, they were really, it's true. They were trying to do that. All right, I see what you mean now. Thanks. I don't think I will watch it. I feel proud of myself for never seeing any of it. Um, this is with the, like, yeah, like the blue, is it the blue aliens, or is Avatar is like a whole series, right? I sound like an idiot. Like I'm not this kind of nerd. Uh, um, Christ already defeated them. It's a lost cause. Interesting. Nerds are kind of like Jews. It doesn't matter what kind you are, as long as you're one, the others tend to like you. Uh, I don't know. Like, I guess, like, what is my nerd? I guess, like, I'm kind of a nerd about like occult stuff. Like, if you, or even just cults themselves. Like, if you looked at my bookshelf right now, I've got a book called Commies. Um, I got some radical feminist stuff. I have some like weird like Kabbalah stuff. There's like a Young and the Shadow of Anti-Semitism over here. Uh, I got a really interesting book called Hack, which is about a tabloid journalist. I don't know. I don't know what kind of nerd I am. Uh, the blue alien avatar is different. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm getting them mixed up. Um, I've come across a little bit of Avatar scrolling through TV channels. How did you find it? Was it any good? Uh, I've never seen it, says Terry. All right. Well, thank you for your honesty. Speaking of radical feminism, I heard Susan Griffin is in hospice now. Well, that's sad. We should send her our prayers. Um, so if you're listening, send a silent prayer out to Susan Griffin. So if we look her up, this is Susan Griffin here. Ooh, January 26th, an Aquarius. Um, ooh, ecofeminism. That's interesting. I can't say that I know that much about her. Um, but wow, 21 books and a screenplay. Well, that seems like an interesting movie that I could watch later. This is right up my alley. Berkeley in the 60s. All right. That's something I could try to find on my shady Russian website. Susan Griffin, is that a Family Guy character? Maybe Peter's long lost aunt or something. Anime's not really my thing. I did like DBZ when I was a kid, Dragon Ball Z, um, and a teenager. I watched a lot of anime at one point. I mean, I used to dress up like a gothic Lolita, and I went to Otakon, and I'm not too proud to admit any of that. But I was always more into the movies than the series, because series, I feel this way about television in general. They just go on forever and ever and ever, and they never end. So I like to rather just watch a movie if I can. Um, my favorite anime guy is dead anyway. Uh, this guy, he was my favorite. I really liked his films. They're really interesting. Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and of course Paprika. And then his series, which is very short, Paranoia Agent. I think is one of my favorite anime series. Now that the stream has just turned into me chatting with you guys. I didn't really care for it. Both pretty interesting. Yeah, I haven't read anything by her. I'm not super familiar with her, but um if she's not feeling well, and um well, we should send her our prayers. Uh yeah, Satoshi Kon was quite the guy. Very interesting. Some of the more interesting anime, I think, um that existed. And then I love the person who wrote the score to Paprika. Forget his name right now, but here, let me just click on music. Yeah, I love the score to that. So without me just rambling about anime and my weird nerd areas, I hope you've enjoyed the reading of this book, Nazis and the Occult. I might return to it at some time in the future. I don't usually like to go over an hour, um, but I think it's really interesting that you can draw parallels from 1919 to now, and that all of these same groups still exist, and they've just become more sophisticated. The propaganda has become more sophisticated. I've been looking into Max Blumenthal lately because I believe that Max Blumenthal is an asset of Russia or Qatar. Maybe you can, check out my posts. And I think my way to spot these people who I believe are communist leaning is that they call America the most imperialistic nation that's evil and all of this kind of bullshit. Uh, Meanwhile, being American and benefiting from American imperialism. Like, I just, it's just so self-destructive and so self-hating. And, a lot of these are like what I would call like capo Jews who have communism as their religion instead. So you have to kind of be on the lookout. You have to have discernment when you're reading these people and like know what they actually stand for. Um, so I guess that's why I made that list. And yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there. I believe this image board should be available this time around because I made a whole account for Imager. I like doing this rather than like searching for the images while I'm streaming because it's just kind of easier to have them all in one place. And so, yeah, thank you guys for joining me today. I appreciate all of you. Do you agree about Max Blumenthal? Like, it's really easy to spot once you notice the language and like the hatred for America and the sort of sugarcoating of Hamas and their atrocities. It's pretty easy to spot. Um, Lots of Russian assets out there. They never recruited you. Uh, Me neither. I think it's because, Terry, that you have the power of Jesus in your heart. But before, when you were doing your sort of more radical feminist stuff, that was not palatable to them either, because I also think that these people hold hands with misogyny as part of the power that they have. And that's also what I see in these people that sugarcoat jihadi terrorism and Hamas and things like this, is that there's a vein of misogyny in there, this hatred of women and children, uh, and I think that's another way that you can kind of spot them. Yeah, no, when you look into Max Blumenthal, and I posted an article about him that someone had written, uh, and also his dad like worked with the Clintons, right? So Sydney, I believe, and the woman he's married to, let's just do a little Max Blumenthal thing while I'm here, you know. I don't got a lot going on today. I think I should be starting my new job soon, so that's cool. Um, I gotta say, once you put your faith into God and you kind of just let life flow over you and let it work out the way that God has planned for you, you'll have a lot less anxiety about it. Um, so let's see, what did I share? So this is it's taken forever to load. This is Max Blumenthal's wife. Okay. So, of course, a so called journalist at the Gray Zone, that's his outlet. Um, and when I call these people journalists, I'm using that word because that's what they call themselves. But I believe they're activists. Max Blumenthal is a perfect case for the activist class because Max Blumenthal probably has never really had to work very hard a day in his life, right? Let's just look him up really quick. And once again, the activist class are people that have the time and the resources to commit to their activism. Um, yeah, his dad, here's his dad, right? Worked for the Clintons. So this is a person who's embedded in the activist class, grew up in these circles, has never had to work hard a day in his life. Also, look at how miserable he looks. He's disgusting. He disgusts me. Anyway, this is his wife. I find this profile to be kind of, revealing. Um, right? She wrote something about Venezuela and the end of the U.S. empire. So anytime you see something like this, you know that they're communists. Okay, and these people are the enemies of America. Like I really truly believe this, but I don't understand what their goals are other than to create a power vacuum and then step into that vacuum. It's all just for power. It doesn't have anything to do with like making life better for people because a revolution, obviously, as we just saw in reading this chapter, does not make life better for people. It makes life difficult. It makes life scary. So I don't really get it. I don't understand it. But um, so this is Max Blumenthal's wife, who also works for the Gray Zone, and I believe Mint Press News was also funded by some some Arab nation. I don't remember which one at this time. I've done I've done research into all of these organizations in the past, but I'd have to look at notes. This was years ago now, but I think you just have to have discernment when you're looking at these people who are speaking publicly. And he also worked for Al Jazeera. So like give me a fucking break. And the Russian Times, like, come on, come on, come the fuck on. Um, they love Islam, right? And Taco Bell halal. That's so fucking ridiculous. What? Uh, yeah, he did. He wrote for some outfit called Akbar. Like these people are enemies of America. I don't know why they hate America so much because they've benefited from growing up in the United States. Is it just like a sense of boredom? Like I'm really not sure what it is. Like I know, just laughing at the Taco Bell. Dude, he's terrifying. How can anyone trust this man? Look at him. Ah, he looks like a ghoul. Look at his thin lips. Yikes. So I don't want a revolution. I've become, again, I think revolution's for the young and it's for the activist class. And I've become much more of a moderate centrist as I grow older. I don't have any children myself, but if I'm a teacher, so I am around kids and I feel a special sense of duty towards them and protecting them. And this is not the kind of thing that anyone needs or wants to go through. Okay, it's just not. And so I don't really understand what their end game is other than to cause division and to pose as journalists, but in reality, they're just activists. And I think that's going to close it out for me today. So I guess the format of this show right now is me like reading a chapter out of this book and then talking about the random things that I think this chapter is very interesting because it really does expose revolution and how terrible it is and how scary it is. Um, and war, like we don't want to do this again. Even though I think kinetic warfare is somewhat passe. We're in a psychological warfare type of situation at this time. Um, yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons I moved out of Philadelphia to Florida was because I was tired of these, you know, really ignorant, liberal teachers who don't have any idea what's going on. They just read the New York Times and they take it at face value and they never question anything. And I'm not here to spread politics in a classroom. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think it's disgusting, especially when we're facing levels of illiteracy in this country that are, we are in for some strange times as even though I don't like Chris Hedges because he's a dirty communist, he has some interesting things to say. We're in some very strange times. What happens to a culture once they abandon logos, right? And it all becomes a culture of images. And I think it's going to be weird. It's going to get weirder. And I just, I pray and I hope that like we don't fall into any kind of revolutionary situation because it's just not a good place to be. And it's scary and it's traumatizing and no one needs to see or live through that. Like we're so lucky. That's what I think really pisses me off about these people like Max Blumenthal and his wife and these people that like want to see America fall. It's like you've never lived through these times. Like I feel like it would be cool if we could like invent some kind of like time machine that like took these people back to like a revolutionary period to see how horrible it was. It's just such a luxury belief to advocate for a communist uprising or even or a fascist one because I see those people out there too. That's why that list of people on my post was like, super diverse. Um, so, with that being said, thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you're having an awesome time doing whatever you're doing. I will catch you on the flip side. Take care and God bless. And thank you so much, Terry Strange, for being a supporter. It's really given me some inspiration. Yeah, I don't know. Thanks, everyone. I'll be back at some point in the future. Peace in the Middle East.